We're going to be taking a 1x6 board, some old shutters, and some IOD knobs, and making a fun shelf out of them.
Apparently I've been watching too much Flea Market Flip because I came up with this idea while watching that show.
Just making a quick measurement there. I'm gonna need 2 of those. My board should be just perfect. And gonna cut these down. These are gonna be the top of the shelf. All right, so the top of the shelves are cut. They're gonna go sit right here on top of the shutters. But now I need to make a support for right here. I'm just gonna use another 1x6 and just draw something real simple up. Doesn't need to be fancy. And you could just do like a straight triangle support and make it real easy. Everything is cut out. Just got to attach all the pieces together and put knobs on it. Close-up view of how all this goes together. I'm using an 18 gauge central pneumatic nail gun, and it also does staples, using 1.5" staples in here. If you don't have staples, you could screw this in. You could use finish nails to attach it. Because they come with a threaded insert, makes installation really easy. They're all built up. If you don't have the ability to cut out these brackets, like I said, you could use something square or triangular over here. You can also pick up shelf hardware at places like Home Depot, and even Hobby Lobby sells it.
Yeah, Hobby Lobby has some really fun metal corbels that would look amazing on these, so that's also a different option. We're going to be using Layered Chocolate by DIY Paint. I would prefer to use Dark and Decrepit, but we're all sold out right now, so we're going to use Layered Chocolate. After we're done painting these with DIY paint, we'll spray some lacquer on it, and before the lacquer's all the way dry, then we'll throw on some milk paint, and hopefully we'll get a fun chippy crackle look, maybe bust out the blow dryer.
See what we can do.
We'll see what happens. So I'm not worried about getting full coverage because this is just a base coat, so that way I have a dark undercoat peeking through my chippy milk paint. So I just want to get it on there as evenly as possible, and if I have some spots missed, no problem. Just try not to have too much chunk anywhere or like paint sitting in a spot because then it'll take longer to dry. So I prefer lacquer when I'm working on projects that I'm going to milk paint, but we don't have any. I'm gonna use shellac. The trick is to put the milk paint on before the shellac is all the way dry. That will create some resist, some crackle, and hopefully some chippy. I've mixed up some flour sack milk paint, 1 part milk paint to 1 part water in this leftover container. I'm gonna go ahead and paint these pieces with it, and hopefully we get some chippy. That shellac isn't quite dry, so I'm hoping it does what we want. So I'm using the dusty brush to just kind of slop the paint on there, especially all these flat surfaces. Then I come back with my little Frenchie and get all the cracks and crevices. It's much faster to use 2 different brushes on a project like this where there's a lot of flat surface but also some detail work than it is to just pick 1 brush. So you can see that we already have some yummy crackle going here. I'm just gonna come back with a second coat. I'm not worried about full coverage, but just so it's not quite so translucent in a few areas, I'll blow dry it one more time and then we'll be ready for our distress and some wax.
Blow drying trick is working. We're getting some really good crackle. I'm gonna take this out in the garage and just hit the flat surfaces with the random orbital and some 220 grit on there. That way we can just smooth out any rough paint or areas that maybe didn't get good coverage like this over here.
Right now I'm just using 220 sandpaper on a block and I'm just smoothing out any of the areas that the orbital couldn't get to. I'm just using a damp rag. I'm gonna come through and wet distress. This may reactivate some of the paint and make it chippier. Mostly I'm just trying to smooth out any of the chunks in the paint because I did kind of a messy finish here. I can take the edges and get those to come through. And that'll show that layer underneath. And the reason why the layer underneath isn't coming off is because there's a layer of shellac in there. Wet distressing these really did the trick to reactivate that milk paint and get it to super chippy crackle. So instead of sealing this with a liquid top coat, which would make it chip even more and maybe not be controlled, we're gonna be using DIY clear wax and we're gonna seal it with that. It will help prevent it from chipping more, give it some good protection on there, but it won't make it chip any more than it already has. For a full video on how to use wax, we'll drop a link below. It's got all the ins and outs. We're just gonna do one coat on this because it's decor. We'll let it sit 24 hours, then we'll give it a good buff and it'll be good to go.
So for a couple of dollars in supplies, the shutters were really cheap at a thrift store and the wood was about $5 for how much I used.
I love the way the milk paint turned out. We'll get some really good close-ups, so stay tuned for that. They're super chippy, really crackled. The trick is put that milk paint on there before your shellac or lacquer is all the way dry when it's nice and tacky still, and that's where you get the crackle. And then when you're all done and it's dry, we found that wet distressing works the best to really get that chippy salvage look. We couldn't achieve that with just regular sandpaper. So wet distressing is really the answer, but be careful because when you wet distress, it will get chippy and sometimes you might not be able to control it.
Sometimes it'll take more off than you want. But that's the fun of milk paint, you never know.
I love all the detail on these IOD knobs. They're also perfect for when you want to use the knob topper stamp and add a little bit more. We wanted a true salvage look, so we didn't add any stamps on top of these, but just the routed edges and the really sturdy riveted insides help this to make it a great shelf. If you'd like to achieve this look, be sure to go to jamiray.vintage.com. You can pick up the 1 1/4 inch knobs, the milk paint and flour sack, the layered chocolate, the paint pixie brushes, and the clear wax that we use to finish these with.
To hang these, what I would do is I would just put a screw right in here if I was going to be using them like in a bathroom above a toilet or something. That way I'd have plenty of strength to hold like towels and put stuff up top here. But you could also do this with the keyholes. They sell these at Hobby Lobby, lots of hardware stores have them, and they just bolt right on the back and you can still hang quite a bit of weight on that.
If you're really worried about it, especially if it's going in a bathroom, a French cleat would also be a really great option.
So we talked in December about doing more chippy videos, so we've got more coming. We're doing a table next week that we're building from scratch for our shop space down in Anthem, so stay tuned for that.
Friends.
Share this video with all your chippy loving friends.
Be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to Jami Ray Vintage for more
DIY.
Hit the subscribe button.